Okay, great. And I'm going to share my screen and you'll see some slides, hopefully. Okay, and when you want me to move on to the next slide, just let me know. So carry on.
Thank you so much, Anna. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Anne Powell-Davies, and I lead the team of educational psychologists in Southend-on-Sea. I have two colleagues with me from our research group this afternoon. So if I hand over first to Sarah, just to say hello for a moment.
Yeah. Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Wendland. I'm a recently qualified educational psychologist, but I have been with the team for the last 2 years on placement as well.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And Lauren.
Hi everybody, nice to see you all. I'm Lauren, so I'm in my final year as a trainee EP at the University of Southampton, and I've also been on placement with Southend last year and this year.
Thank you both. So everybody, just to give you a little bit of context about who we are, we put a short slide together on our next slide, just to talk to you a little bit about who we are and what we do and what our focus is. So Anna, if you could move us to the next slide, please.
I was pressing the button, but it doesn't seem to want to play.
That's fine. Let's just take our time and I'll just start to talk gently through it while we look at that lovely slight technical glitch. Okay, so our team work for and on behalf of our Southend community. Our focus is very much to have a positive impact on the lives of our children and our young people. And we do that through direct work, but also, and as importantly, by working with the adults that support our young people. That way we can empower and enable them to support additional needs and children in our general community. We promote a strength-based approach in our work, celebrating areas of success, and we use these as great resources to help us to make a difference. And I guess if there were 4 key themes that we're always thinking about in our work, it's about how we can be person-centered, how we can work collaboratively with all our partners, including our families and our educational settings and other professionals, how everything that we do, we aim to co-produce. And what we're going to talk to you about this afternoon is very much featuring that way of working. And as I said, being very mindful to think about strengths as a huge resource for us to move forward with together. If our slides were working beautifully for you, you would see 4 photographs, and you can probably just about see that in the corner of the screen. And what I want to do this afternoon is just talk about that research group. We're very fortunate to have 2 members of the team with us this afternoon. In addition to Sarah and Lauren, we also have Dr. Sarah Sibbers, who's our educational psychologist, continuing her research, and you'll hear a little bit more about that shortly. But she's been working with our team for some years now. And we also had Kate Boyle, who was our psychology assistant, who started the research with us. And we're delighted to say that she has now started her doctoral training to become an educational psychologist. And I guess from my perspective, having that diversity within our team to look at areas of research and develop those together is one of our great strengths in the service.
And are you able to see those slides now? Because I can see them in front of me.
So I'm not seeing the change at the moment. So I'm still seeing that ready to present picture.
Okay.
Yes, actually, yes, I can now. Thank you so much.
Great.
Beautiful timing as I pass on to Sarah Wendland and to Lauren to talk about the next slides.
Thank you, Anne. So Lauren and I are going to be talking through the research project that we were part of, and we're going to tell you a little bit about how it evolved from starting as quite a small project that we started within Southend, and how that's now become a national project. And I was going to say, Anna, if you have managed to go on to the next slide. Sorry, mine are still stuck. So,
so I'm on securing the voices of our children and young people. Can you see that?
Yeah, can we go on to the next slide?
Yeah, sure.
There is.
That one?
Just waiting for it to catch up.
Yeah, I was going to say I've got a bit of a delay, so I'll carry on anyway.
Talk.
So this really, the project was really born out of the fact that we were in lockdown, and as educational psychologists, we normally work quite heavily with our families, you know, gaining the voices of our children and young people and hearing about their experiences. But during lockdown, we weren't as able to do that as much as we would typically do within the settings. And we were really gaining a sense that the voices weren't being heard. There was lots of conversations happening nationally about what was going to happen with the return to school, what government were putting in place around education, but yet we felt that their voices were really missing. So we started out to look at gaining their voices in a way around what was happening for them around their education, and thinking about that possible transition back into school as well. So we devised 4 different questionnaires, which based on the different experiences that were out there. So we had primary age questionnaires, which were for children at home and for children who were still accessing the school environment, and the same for secondary age and college age together. And we created these questionnaires on Google Forms, and we shared them as widely as we possibly could. So through our own social media, through our website, through our wonderful Senkos in schools, through other partnerships we had with Sendias, Parent Partnership, all the different services we could think of, we asked them to share it, and we had such a fantastic response from the young people. And I'll let Lauren tell you a little bit about how much we had this response.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, so as we said, we were really interested in those different experiences, and a large part of what drove us and what we were thinking about was actually as EPs and as people that work with children and families, we were really aware that as we were going through lockdown, we were going to eventually reach a stage where the children in these different situations, so maybe going into school during lockdown or staying completely at home, very soon we were aware that they were all going to be back in school in whatever shape that would take. And we were very aware that we were going to want to support that, and we were going to want to have some implications and some supportive things to put in place for them. But what we didn't know was what the children themselves actually wanted and how they felt about the situation that they had been in. So this very much drove our lens, if you like, when we were looking at the responses coming in. And using those Google Forms, it was all anonymous, but we could log in and we could see the responses as they started to come in. And it was safe to say, Sarah, that it absolutely snowballed, didn't it? And we ended up with over 700 responses, which was a much larger response than we had anticipated, and we were so excited to see that it had really taken off. And I think as the word spread, we really got that sense that children and young people were so willing and ready to share their thoughts. And I think that was really a driver for us, wasn't it, that we felt children felt that somebody was listening and was interested in their thoughts and weren't just asking them these things to see how they felt and generate some themes. We wanted to do something with it. We wanted to have a look at what they were saying, why, and how we would reflect that back. So in order for us to have a look at that, we started to gather together some themes, and we're going to talk about those in a little bit more detail in a minute. But it was so interesting what we had. There were some that we kind of had a bit of an expectation of, some things that we might see, and then we also had some really unexpected and some really different themes and thoughts being generated that were so interesting to look at and really helped inform our project going forward, as we're going to talk about what eventually happened with it.
Yeah, and I think, as Lauren's already said, hearing the young people's voices was such a powerful moment for all of us. We were sitting there reading their words, their voices about their experiences, and it was really overwhelming at times just how much they wanted to share and talk to us about, both positive experiences but also the experiences that might have been a bit more difficult for some of our young people. But really, I felt really honoured to be able to read them and to gather them and to be able to share those back as well, and feeling that we were being a part of a project where children and young people's voices are at the centre of it, and the most important thing moving forward and to help us make decisions around what's going to be good and support for them. So if we can move on to the next slide, I'm really sorry, mine seems to have frozen, so I'm not sure what slide we're on, but hopefully we're going to go on to a slide with some diagrams. Great, thank you.
Can you see that better?
That's lovely, yeah.
So so this is slide 5. What do you want, 5 or 6?
5's perfect, thank you.
5. I'm going to leave it like that if everyone can see that. I know it's not ideal, but it's better than.
Thank you. And so as we worked together, so there was 4 of us, we worked together across the different age ranges to come up with general themes, and actually the themes spanned the whole age ranges, so there was nothing specific to a particular age range. It really was, these ideas came across all the ages, and we had 4 themes, which are safety, certainty, relationships and opportunities. And as Lauren has already said, some of these we kind of expected to come up, or we thought might come up, and other ones were very much a surprise, or something that we hadn't really considered or had thought of before. So on this side, we've got certainty and safety, and these two were super linked, and they really crossed over. So safety is the idea about that physical safety, understanding what was going on, the aspects of the response to the pandemic, really. And something I was quite shocked about, especially with the secondary age pupils, was the level of detail that they were providing me about their knowledge of the pandemic. So making comments about the R rate, making comments about the current practices that were around, about safety measures, about social distancing, and really having a level of knowledge greater than I'd expected, but linked in with that, really wanting to know what was being done for them in terms of their school, in terms of their local authority, and in terms of the whole wide countrywide aspects as well. And that came into the certainty. So the certainty was what is being put in place to support us, what is there to help us. For some of the young children from primary school, there was lots of questions about and comments around knowing that mummy's going to drop me off and pick me up, and where do I go at the beginning of the day, having those routines and that understanding about what is school going to be like when I come back, because they seemed to understand that school was going to be different, but just weren't sure what that would look like. And that was really important for us to hear, because actually then we could really easily speak to schools and say, this is what the young people want. Can you create a booklet, a leaflet? And some of our young people actually gave us those suggestions themselves. They said, it'd be really great if my teacher wrote me a letter, or I'd really like a leaflet about this. So actually they were generating ideas of how to be supported and what would help them alleviate their worries and anxieties about the situation. So that's safety and certainty. And I know Lauren's going to move on to relationships and opportunities as well, which are on the next slide.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. And as you were talking, as you were relaying those quotes, I was just really thinking about how much the quotes from these children and young people really did drive us all the way through this project. And it's something that we've returned to many, many times. And we've found that so powerful because they stuck in our minds. As we had our discussions to draw the themes together, we were relaying those quotes to each other. And it's become, actually, hasn't it? The quotes are a really integral part of everything that we've created from that, and that felt really important to us, to keep those and lift those up and keep those as the central focus, not just to say to children and young people, we've heard you, but to actually reflect that back and show we've taken on those quotes and we've listened to them, directly as they were said. This slide is really interesting, actually, because of course we expected that relationships would be extremely important to children and young people, as they are for all of us. But I think what really struck us was just the amount that relationships seemed to underpin everything that the children and young people were talking about. This was something that we really wanted to lift up because it was so important to the children and young people. And not even mentioning, there was mention of friends, there were mention of teachers and the important role that they played in their lives, seeking that connection, really wanting that connection. And for those who were going into school in lockdown, feeling really that was a benefit to them, that they could maintain those connections. It really helped them and was really a protective factor through lockdown, which was so important. But we had mention of dinner ladies, we had mention of site staff, people that they may see on their way into school, that it was a central aspect, and we just found ourselves thinking, this is so important. These relationships are at the core of what we're talking about here. So I think expected in a way, because we know how important they are, but actually to hear that, and I always go back to these direct quotes, to hear people say, my favourite dinner lady served me up nice dinners, it was so lovely, because it was so important. And moving to the opportunities, this was a really interesting aspect that came out and that we had many lengthy discussions about, and again kept going over the quotes from young people. It was really interesting because, of course, it was quite sad that there were a lot of missed opportunities, and we really wanted to validate that as part of children and young people's school experience, the things that they felt they had missed. We had quotes about a school play, they were really looking forward to playing a particular character, or mummy and daddy coming and watching the school play. We had mention of proms, really important events that are part of school life, and we really wanted to lift that up. We really wanted to acknowledge that these things were missed and they were very important, and we hoped that the children would have opportunities in the future, not to replace these missed opportunities, but maybe have something to recreate that in a creative way that they could. We also had a really interesting flip side that we were not expecting, about how many opportunities children and young people had created for themselves out of lockdown, things that were really important to them, picking up old hobbies that they hadn't had maybe let fall to the wayside a little bit because they'd got a bit busy, time with family that again went back to the relationships. It was all interlinking all the time. It was so important that they had the time to go back to those connections. There were people that were picking up new hobbies, and there were people that were going into school in lockdown and seeing a changed environment but saying it was great because I got to do this lesson in a slightly different way. We got to do some gardening, some baking, and that was really touching. Actually, that was really, really lovely to see. And again, we just kept going back to those quotes about, I've really loved gardening, I've seen some friends from the year above who I wouldn't have seen before, I've made some new friends, and when we go back to school I'm going to introduce my old friends to my new friends. And it was a real, I guess, positive outlook that we hadn't quite expected and was so wonderful to see, and something we really didn't want to lose as we went forward.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. And talking about not wanting to lose their voices when we were moving forwards, we discussed about how we were going to share this information back, and as a group we felt it was really important that actually we speak directly back to our children and young people, because they had presented us their views and their voices, and we wanted to be able to share that directly back. So if we look onto the next slide, we actually delivered a webinar directly to the young people where we spoke about what they shared with us. And from this work, we were really lucky that actually many other services across the country had been interested in our work, saw our webinar, and actually started contacting us and saying they were really excited by the project and what a lovely way to communicate with our children and young people and to gain their voices. And we've now linked up with other services, so mainly Nottingham City EPS, and they replicated what we'd done, and then we pulled all of that together and had fantastic response from over 1,700 pupils. And we compared our data, which was really similar, and created these overarching 5 overarching themes on the left-hand side. And we created a joint report, which we shared. But ultimately from this, we were then thinking about how can we use their voices, what they've taught us, to affect change at the widest level. So thinking about government, think about policy, because they were creating and talking about what was going to happen when they go back to school, what was going to be the new normal within the education world. But actually we had information that could really support and affect change on that, especially considering those new opportunities that they talked about, thinking about the curriculum and that importance on the relationships, and having that as a priority on that return to school, and really prioritising that before we get down to the academic learning, or the catching up, or that the different ways that people were talking about the learning part of school, but think about it in that broader context. And if we go on to the next slide as well, we've continued to work with this project, and we're moving it forward again, because now our children and young people are within the school, we really want to know actually what did it work? You know, what helped you at that moment? How has that return to school been for you? Because it's all been done differently, but we're really keen to understand what your experience are. And we're now got a project with, I think we met with 22 other colleagues from across the England, Ireland and Scotland and Wales, so across the whole United Kingdom, to actually start implementing the next stage of this project. And I'm going to let Lauren talk about that in a moment, because we also would love you to start thinking about actually maybe what could you do with this information, what could you do next? And we have a little Menti poll, which I'll put into the chat as Lauren talks about this project.
Sure, thank you. So yeah, I'm really excited about this project going forward, as I have been the whole time as this has snowballed. As you can probably see, the theme has stayed the same throughout. We just had a really strong sense that we couldn't just sit with the information that kept being given to us, and we wanted to reflect that back to the young people. And it just seemed that every time we did this, we gathered more interest and we had more ideas of how we could take this forward. And this project is exactly the same. It just seems to be that we're going wider and wider reaching each time, which is fantastic. So this project, again, we're keeping that same core value that we've had all the way through. The aim of this is really to have children and young people in mind when we're thinking about implications, when we're thinking about practices that we might want to put in place. And also we had some really interesting discussion about children and young people that have returned to school. Have their ideas that they put forward been put into place? And if so, how has that translated? How do they feel about that? Maybe they thought something might work and it's worked in a slightly different way for them. We're really wanting to get those quotes again, as we did before, and we're really wanting to hear from children and young people themselves, so that we can say, we've taken all of these reflections and we've taken them on board and we've listened to what you've said, and we still want to know more. This is an ongoing, we haven't collected your views to collect them and reflect them back. We've collected them to take them forward. So this is really what this project is about. And I could talk on and on about it because it's just so exciting to have so many people on board and interested with it. I think watch this space. I think it's going to be a really great project going forward.
I'm so sorry, my internet just completely dropped out there. So would you like me to try sharing slides again, or have we gone past slides?
So Anna, if you could just get the last two slides on, just while Sarah is getting ready with that Menti poll, I think that might be helpful. If it's
really
going to be
sorry, I've never had that issue until I actually need to share my screen.
Well done.
Can you see that again?
Yes, we can now.
All right, is that the right place?
That's a fine place to be right now. And
Lovely.
I guess what we wanted to do, bearing in mind those hundreds of young people that have already taken part in the first part of the survey, and those hundreds of young people and students that have worked on that project with Nottingham and also with Southend. And now as we go into phase 3 and we're setting up a new survey for our colleagues, we just wanted to say on behalf of our children and young people, thank you for listening this afternoon. Those voices of our children and young people are being heard, they're being acted upon, and what we're trying to do is to take them into as many different arenas as possible, just to show what it is that they've talked about, and the reports that we've co-constructed together, and the detail that our young people have asked us to think about as we consider opportunities for change in education in the future. So maybe now it might be useful to look at Menti, and then perhaps we'll come back to the final slide, which will give you lots of information about how you can find out much more about the reports, the projects, and the next steps. Sarah.
Thank you. So in the chat, I have put a link to Menti and a code. So if you click on the link and then put the code in, it will take you through to a question. And as you put in answers, it will start to show, and I can share my screen so you can see what the responses are. But the question really is about thinking about what can your next steps be, and what could you take forward from this project. So please get typing. If you're struggling to get onto Menti, then please put them in the chat and we will talk about them from there as well. then just going to share my screen, hopefully. So about gaining children's and young people voices for, I suppose, a variety of different topics. You can gain them around lots of different areas.
I think that's something that really, in all our discussions about this most recent project about the return to school, that's been something that's come out. We've ended up snowballing again because obviously this is quite a widespread project, and in different areas of the country, people are under different levels of restriction. So that in itself was something interesting that came up. And we're certainly, I agree, we're finding all these nuanced little bits that we could explore. And it's really exciting, the possibilities it opens up. Actually, such a variety of voices can be gained, and so easily, I think, is what strikes me.
Yeah, and something I really like about it as well is you might have your expectations, but actually what they give back might not fit that, and the way they share things is just so enlightening, because actually you get a real insight into what they have been thinking, how they've been feeling, and what's important to them, because it's really important that they are part of the decision-making process of their life, because they're the ones living it. It's all very well and good us as adults saying, oh, we think this is important for you, but actually we might be barking up completely the wrong tree, and for a young child or young person, they might be thinking that's really not important. And it can be some really small, simple things, but can make such a difference for them and for their lives, really.
Hayley says in the chat that Menti's only allowing 25 words or characters. I'm not sure. So if anyone is struggling, just pop something in the chat and I'll read it out. There's some more.
Oh, lots has just come up. Discuss with our local EPs, definitely. I'm always very keen to get involved with different people and to use children and young people's voices. Consider use for strategy, service planning. And I think that's something that certainly, from my point of view, until I became part of this project, although I like to think about strategy at the widest sense and strategic planning for everyone, actually making sure that you're linked up with different partners and people who are able to do that, and as you are all part of that strategic side of things, it's a really great opportunity to use that and to think about it in different ways. That's certainly something that I've been excited to think about as well.
Thank you, Sarah. Anna, I wonder if you could take us back to our very last slide,
yeah, of course,
if that's possible. And then we'll open up to wider questions and a broader conversation. So I was just thinking about trying to give you the best opportunity to access some of those reports. As Sarah and Lauren were saying, we have been really delighted to see how many different services across the country have been interested to join up. I think that idea of liberating, if you like, a young person's voice and listening to what they would like to see happening for the future, we know it's right at the heart of the code of practice. It's also right at the heart of our values and principles as a service and how we want to work. And that idea of seeing those themes replicated in those repeat studies that we're doing is something that's been really quite remarkable. So as we just nip through, thank you so much, Anna. So that final page just shares with you a few of the resources that we've been developing and that have taken off exponentially since we moved into lockdown. So we have our web pages, and that's the first link there, Southend Learning Network, which will give you lots of information. Our Educational Psychology Reach Out platform is another area where you can see the webinars, both short edited versions of the key themes and the whole webinar that we delivered to our children and young people on the 22nd of May, when we were literally giving our first findings back to the people that gave us their views. We also have an awful lot of webinars that we've developed now over the spring and summer term, and we're starting our season 2 for Reach Out. But again, if you wanted to know how to find some of those articles and webinars, if you look at something that we're calling our flipbook or our brochure that was developed by our psychology assistant Imogen, it's a really nice way of looking at the themes that we've been working on and finding those webinars really quickly and easily. And of course, we're on Twitter. So I wonder whether, Anna, if I can just pass over to you just to start that, thinking about any questions or any broader discussions that colleagues who are joining us this afternoon might want to have.
Absolutely. I'm just going to stop sharing.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I guess any first reflections, I suppose, on what you've heard? I'm just opening the chat because I think there might be some conversation in there.
And I suppose while you're doing that, Anna, I'm very struck by part of the report that was written by Nottingham City and Southend, which had a particular area around implications for policymakers and that opportunity to think about how we might be able to affect change. And with our SEND leads and our health commissioners with us this afternoon, feels like it's a very great opportunity to think about how things might be a little bit different. So some of the things that came out of that co-produced report were around having that multifaceted, flexible, co-produced curriculum for our children and young people, and thinking about how we might broaden that curriculum to really embrace well-being for our children and young people, not just now because of COVID, but just to really integrate that into the way that we teach now and into the future for our young people. Thinking about how young people can be ready and safe to learn, and thinking about what are those characteristics that allow our children to feel absolutely supported in an educational environment, to take those risks, take those steps, develop those lovely growth mindset attributes that they could have. And just thinking about what might be our opportunity to bring back some of our children that have been out of education for a while. And we were minded this afternoon in the main body of our session to think about emotionally based school avoidance. So those young people who are not coming back to school, and possibly many more of those because of what's been happening over the last 6 months. So what is it that we could do to our curriculum that might entice those young people to take those first steps back over the threshold into the classroom?
Lovely, thanks, Dan. Any thoughts on anything that Anne's just mentioned? I've got the chat open, no one's popped anything in there, but do feel free to pop your hand up or just shout out. We're a nice small group. Are we all in need of another cup of tea?
It's possible, isn't it?
What about does anyone know of, or has anyone been involved in anything similar in your local areas in the last few months?
Hiya, I have not. I work for Darlington Cams, and we did. We worked with Youth Watch and Health Watch, but and they come in just before lockdown and were sort of completing a report on how they found coming into Cams, sort of the colours, if it was overpowering with leaflets and things like that. So we took the time to use lockdown with it, nobody being in the service, and we sent out canvases to people that use our service, young carers, parent forum, children, and we got the canvases back and we incorporated that into the waiting area wall. So we're removing all the toys and everything, but it was all joint work from Youth Watch. They implemented what they wanted. We split it into 2 halves. We did a low stimulus jungle, midnight jungle, and then the other side for the older young people and how they communicate right now, and it was mainly telephones. So we put mobile phones on our wall with self-help and a reference library at their sort of request, and just really worked with them the whole way through lockdown. But it was so rewarding. So I know I know it's different, but it's quite emotional, isn't it? A bit like being involved on that level. So yeah, I just wanted to share that with you.
Amanda, that sounds like really great work that you've been doing there. And as you say, when you come alongside young people and you start to listen to their ideas, you realise that they take us to places that we could never have thought of, and offer us such different opportunities, don't they?
Yeah, I was really privileged to like have the time to spend with them, and they worked with the artist. It was exactly what they wanted. So really, I feel like it's creating a community hub, more welcoming, more removing the stigma and the distraction for the young people, painting the canvases. You know, we got feedback from the parents saying it was the first time in 10 weeks that their child sat still and thought of the focus. The canvases were getting made into books because the children wrote interesting facts on the animal of choice. But it's going to go on, and like, so I'm going to feed this back to Tracy Fay and see if there's anything she can sort of develop with health like that, or something similar what you guys are doing.
Amanda, it would be really good to be in touch with you. I wonder if we could perhaps exchange emails, just so that we could just be on message with you with that, because I'm really interested in that work that you've carried out, and I know the team will be.
Yeah, I'd love to share it with you. Yeah.
Thank you, Amanda.
It sounds fantastic.
Yeah, really cool.
Thank you. Anyone else have any reflections or thoughts?
So I could ask, I presume the slides are going to be shared, because I would really like to look at all those. I'm sorry, I had to dip out in the middle because I had an urgent thing, so I didn't hear everything that you've done. I heard the beginning and the end, but that last slide, it will give me all the information, which sounds really good. I don't think so I come from Bath and North East Somerset, and I don't think that we've done anything that's as what you've done. I can't ever say that word. So it would be really interesting to have a really good look at what you've done and see the webinars. So did you have a company help you do the webinars, can I ask?
No, actually, we were just very, very fortunate with the knowledge, skills and abilities of our team that we were able to pull that together. So in terms of the webinars, our wonderful Dr. Sarah Sivers and Dr. Nicole Schnackenberg were already thinking about how we could reach out to others. So we developed that. And Rosemary, you said you're from Bath and North East Somerset.
I am.
So we've had colleagues from your area ask to link our web pages to your local offer. So already we're working together in partnership, which is so exciting.
That's good. So is that our psychology service that are doing that?
It is the psychology service that reached out to us and asked for permission, which was a lovely thing to do, just so that we could share resources together. But when you see the presentation slides, if you look at the early slides, you will see there are links, and they will take you directly to a blog that we've done and to our longer reports. And then the webinars will take you to the rest of the work, and then you can follow us and just keep up with what we're doing. We'd love to share that.
Okay, we'll make sure that you all get the slides emailed afterwards.
And I'll have a chat with Jane, who's our lead EP, who will obviously be able to put me in the right direction. Then I don't manage the EP service, so I do work with them closely, but obviously hadn't picked that one up. So that's really interesting. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rosemary.
So I can see that Stephanie is typing something, so we'll wait for that. Any other, I mean, that sounds great that there's already some sharing going on. And actually, I think our new digital approaches and embracing digital actually makes things a lot easier to share, doesn't it? So
absolutely.
So it's a real opportunity. Stephanie said that she's having some audio difficulties. So am I, I'm afraid, Stephanie. But I'm really interested in the work that you've done and would like to link up. So yeah, we'll like I said, we'll make sure we share slides, but email addresses maybe are easier for you just to talk directly to each other. So Stephanie, I don't know if you want to put your email address in the chat, or I can make sure I kind of copy everyone into an email afterwards, whatever you prefer.
Thank you, Stephanie. We'll definitely follow up. Now, could
Stephanie's email in the chat there.
Our two researchers, Sarah and Lauren, are actually going to be live on one of our webinars in about 15 minutes this afternoon. So I think I need to give them permission, if you don't mind, to step away and get ready for your live broadcast at 4 o'clock, ladies.
Well, go to the makeup and costume room, have you?
Yes, definitely.
That sounds very exciting. Thank you so much for being involved. That's great.
Thank you so much for having us. It's been lovely to talk to you and share the work we've been doing and to hear what you guys are already doing as well. It's really good and would be great to link up in the future.
Oh, thank you for being a part of it. It's great.
Really looking forward to speaking to you more.
Yes, I've just put my email in for Darlington Cams.
Wonderful. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Amanda.
Looking forward to hearing from you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
On that note, you have a few minutes before your next workshop. I think starts at 5 to 4. So we do have time for another question or reflection, or equally if you'd like to have a bit of a comfort break in between workshops, feel free. This has been recorded. I don't know how that will have worked given that I dipped out halfway through, but it will all be up on our website and we'll share all the slides. And anyone that wants to make those connections, pop your email and we can make sure that happens too. Hayley, I can see you're typing something too, so we'll give you a minute to do that. Thank you, really enjoyed, and yeah, that was very, very exciting and a real kind of positive to come out of such a tricky situation, I think, as well. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so
much.
much.
Learning a bit more about it as well, so thank you.
All right then. Well, off you go to your next workshop. You've got 10 minutes or so to get a cup of tea. Thank you all for joining, and thank you, Anne.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you, Anna.
Bye. Bye-bye.
I thought you did a brilliant job. I love your calm, even when it gets a bit challenging.